Okay, you are now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to Behind Closed Doors with myself, Alan Merritt, and I've got a lovely guest tonight, and that's Jojo Tinkerbell. And with us in the chat room as well is Sue Peak. She's joined us to have a little chat later on. But this story is all about a great campaigner in Tinky. Now, Tinky, I've seen many a video Tinky's done, seen her on the streets. Fantastic campaigner, works very hard, gets involved in lots and lots of people, and has her own show. And she's on the other foot really because she's always interviewing and talking to other people, and it's very rare that we actually hear about Tinky. So I've invited Tinky on tonight to let her tell us about her story. Good evening, Tink.
Oh, hi, Alan. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
That's right, darling.
Say what an amazing job you're doing, because it is important that people speak up about what they've gone through. It could be through your smaller years, your middle years. It doesn't matter, because once people hear what's actually going on and that the system is failing children, perhaps we can all join together and get something done about this.
Well
Um,
said.
it is good to hear. I mean, I find it awful listening to you tell me your testimonies, and like when Sue tells me her testimonies, for the fact that you were all small children, and children can't defend themselves against adults. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I find really terrifying out there, that people aren't there for the children where they should be. So from my point of view, I'm coming in as an older child, not obviously a small child. I've had a nice upbringing as a child. I didn't live with my dad, which I think is quite an important part of, where I am and how I got to where I am now, if that makes sense as well. Not that my dad wasn't a part of my life, I was, but I didn't seem like he didn't really have like a house that I could go to, if that makes sense. I think he had like a bed sit, but he used to go to my nan's every weekend and stuff, and then my dad would be there, and or Christmases, birthdays, we'd always spoil me rotten and stuff, and everything. But we didn't have a relationship, as in I couldn't tell you to this day what he liked on his toast. So that makes sense.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
he's a good dad. But my mum had two other daughters who were older than me. There was 5 years difference. Now we had a different dad. Mum was married previously, and their dad turned out to be a bit of a bugger. He liked the pub, you see, and then he liked to come back and hit me mum. So my mum, she left him, and then she met me dad. And then I think I was only about 8 months old and we split up or something. But my dad was a different again. He liked to gamble. So my mum was like, "Oh, I've had enough of this." One was basically go in the pub all the time, coming back and hitting me. And even, back then, that would have been in what, the 70s. So, when my mum was going through her troubles with her husband, then she went to a doctor's and said to him, like, he's hitting me. And he said to her, he said, "Get a frying pan," and hit him back, basically. So the next, like, few days, my mum was back in the doctor's, and she's like, "Yeah, that idea of the frying pan will look at me head. Do you get me?" So, when you look back at the system, it does, beg to question, has it ever been there to help us? Do you know what I mean? So I'd say I was brought up, nice, in a happy environment. We didn't have loads of stuff, but do you know what I mean? Who does? My mum did her best for us girls. But what I do want to push on is my older sister, who didn't grow up with her dad. She always had like quite bad psychological problems. I mean, she did grow up with him for a bit, but what it was her dad didn't want to know her. Now, my other sister coped with that quite well. Her attitude was, well, if he didn't want to know me, well, it's his hard luck. But then, obviously, my other sister, she used to take it out a lot on my mum. So, it is important having like this family structure, and, having obviously the right parents. I don't mean you want to be with alcoholics or people that hit you and stuff, but the more that I'm looking back at society, the more I'm seeing that the government's just not helped the people. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so then my mum brought us up, and she met a husband who she's with now. I think I was like 11, and he was absolutely a wonderful man. We had one daughter. His wife had died of cancer. So they've been, together ever since. But it's not all been plain roses for everybody, because my sister, the middle sister, she met somebody in around about 92, 93, and she had a baby with him. And then he died in bed with her, and the baby was only like 6 weeks old.
Oh my God.
So, my sister, back in the 90s, I think it was, if you kind of think about council estates and things like that, everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody's business, if you like. But sadly, it died because he'd been taking drugs from like a young teenager, and his heart had given way. So he'd been out, gone and took a loads of drugs, come back, and then he died in bed, when my sister was there. And then obviously she'd woken up to him and he died. Now, his family had kind of like blamed my sister. Well, it wasn't her fault, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, he'd gone out and done what he'd done, and he'd been doing what he'd been doing for a long time. Now, if he hadn't have been doing what he'd been doing for such a long time, he might have survived this at that point, if that makes sense to you. So my sister went through like quite a hard time. She couldn't really cope with the baby at that point, because she was obviously emotionally distressed, because the baby's dad had passed on. Now, when I look back at the help for her, there wasn't any help for her. No one supported her. Nobody came out like from the doctors, or there was no grieving process. No one was explaining her emotions as well to her, and all the things that she was going through. And then my sister went through a bit of a troubling time, and my mum kind of started to look after my nephew a lot, and she was there more for him than maybe what my sister was at that point. But that was because she wasn't coping with what had gone on with her. So he died in 1993, and then in December of 1993, I ended up babysitting for obviously it was one of the girls who would live locally to us. It was New Year's Eve, she was going out. Anyway, that night she'd brought back people to her place, to her flat, and then the brother of my sister's partner had come back. So this is like the bit of a tie with how we got this connection, if this makes sense. So obviously I'd found out that this, my children's dad now was my, how can I explain it now, was the brother of my nephew. Does that, the brother of my sister's partner? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And as a kid, I wanted to sort out that, it wasn't my sister's fault, because, you've got to think, it was only like 15, wasn't my sister's fault. And I knew that if the family was seeing my nephew, that might help her. Do you know what I mean? And I think she was going through a lot of her trouble, because she was getting, she must have felt like the whole world was against her, when, it wasn't her fault anyway. Do you know what I mean? So that's how this relationship basically started, that, and I was babysitting, and then we ended up going to his mum and dad's house, which was weird, to go and get drink to bring it back. Does that make sense? So I like,
you went somewhere where there was drink. Yeah.
So then he come back to the babysitter. So then we come back to the babysitters, and then that was sort of how it started, really. He was getting me to go back round to the babysitters, because they were all canoodling there, because there was a few of them. And then, he started having sex with me like straight away. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, which, when you look back at things, you think, well, it's a bit weird, isn't it? And bearing in mind, he was 25 at the time. So I'm 15, I'm trying to basically, sort out an issue for me poor sister, because I'm still, I'm back in the 90s.
How old was you, Tink?
I was 15.
15. So it was a 10-year difference.
Yeah. So there's 10 years difference. Obviously, I'm just trying to sort out things for my sister, because I knew that it would help her if they were seeing my nephew, because he was only, he would have only been like a bit, he was only little then. that would help her get through what she was going through. If that makes sense. So, but the family did end up seeing my nephew through me, ending up going out with him, you know. So in 1994, I was still at school. So from the December time, we used to go up to where this babysitter was, and you know they all used to sit there and that, and then I used to go and sit off there. And then that January, my mum phoned the police and got the police to come round, but they hid me behind the couch. So, you know, looking at it to the fact that, well, when police are going out looking for people, they don't actually look anywhere because I was in the room when they came in. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, and looking at the fact of it from the ex-partner, they obviously knew what they were doing to hide me behind the couch. So they knew that, do you know what I mean? And then by the February of 1994, I was basically held in his bedroom, if that makes sense.
God.
Yeah. So, you know, no one was really raising. The police weren't doing anything. So I don't know really. I can't speak for the mum at that point. You know, I'm sure she felt like banging her head against a brick wall. I should have been in school, but no one was raising alarms at the school. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, this was really basically allowed to go on. And I didn't leave his mum and dad's house until 1996. So I was there for 2 years. So it wasn't like I was there for 5 minutes.
Yes.
And then during that time, I'd just be basically used as a sex toy in his bedroom, if that makes sense. So, you know.
What was you, 17 now, was you?
What else?
Was you 17 now?
No, I was still 15.
Still 15, sorry.
Yeah, so this is the like the first sort of year.
Rams.
And then by the time April came, I would have been pregnant, but I didn't know that I was because I didn't really understand sex. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think we had sex education at school. I'm sorry for laughing, and I don't mean to laugh, but this is the ridiculousness of it. I mean, and now look at what they're trying to teach the kids. Do you know what I mean? I'm like horrified, but I don't remember really having any sex education. Obviously, we knew that, you know, the willy went in there, and then there was a bit, you know what I mean? But I don't think I really understood it, to be honest with you. And, you know, yeah, you know, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I was in some weird, like, Satanist thing. It wasn't like weird stuff are out like that. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, do you know what I mean? It's not like I was chained up or anything in there, but he would lock me in the bedroom. You know, if you went to go out, he'd lock me in and say, oh, just in case.
Did you try and fight it, or did you know no better?
Well, I don't really know. I think because I was a kid at the time, and do you know what, Al? I think hanging around on the streets in January, February, it was freezing.
Yeah, it was.
And just had, like, you know, in his bedroom, he had like central heating and that, and it was just warm. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, you've got to think of it from a kid's perception as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could have been, you know, saying, well, no, do you know what I mean? He was a grown man, you know, having a relationship with a child, and he shouldn't have been. And then, so then I must have been pregnant in the April, but I didn't find out until the May. Well, obviously the shock and the thing of what, you know, that I was pregnant, obviously I didn't even understand it. I hadn't even thought about kids, you know. I think at school we've been doing this, we used to do a thing on a Monday morning. When you got, the older you got, you used to do a thing when you got in your last year where you went to like a school or something. And me and my mate used to go to like a nursery school, you know, but we used to like kids, but, you know, I hadn't thought about having him.
Yeah.
You know, not at all. And then obviously I'd found out I was pregnant and everything. And then after that, he started to say, like, as if it might not be his. And I was like, well, where's all this coming from? Because I haven't been anywhere. I've been locked in your house. Do you know what I mean? And then in the July time, I felt unwell one day, and I just had this funny feeling. And then anyway, he dropped me off at the hospital. So, but going back to me finding out I'm pregnant, alarm bells should have been raised by the GP because it's all in my medical records. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they could have done something then, and, you know, inform the police. You know, asked who, you know, the father is, blah blah blah. But they didn't do that. But going back to thinking about, when they made this consent thing where, like if the doctors, like under a certain age, if the kids go to the doctors, they have to keep it confidential.
Yeah.
I'm starting things in a different way now. Now I know all about this child abuse. Do you know what I mean? So, if a child, even if they are 15, you can't just say it's confidential because obviously something's happened there. Whether it be with somebody at their own age, whether it be someone with 10 years difference, 20 years difference, or it could be a rape. You don't know what's gone on, and that's the point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that's what they do with all the teenagers now. Well, we're
Would
going
you
to have.
would you have said that at that age you was kind of like a mature young woman at that age, 15, or
No, well, no, I'd say I was more like a bit of a tomboy,
Yeah.
like, or we just more wanted to laugh. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? We
no?
just wanted to
Absolutely,
laugh.
yeah, one of the lads.
I don't think I was thinking about having a long-term relationship for the rest of my life, and that was my life signed and sealed. Does that make sense or anything?
Yeah, no,
Like,
totally get it. Yeah.
I've had my older sister go through such a traumatic time for not having a dad in her life, and then I'm seeing my sister, and I mean, my sister went, she, without sounding awful, because I don't want to be on here just to talk about people in a bad way. There was some scary times with her. I can remember her smashing a bedroom up and all sorts, and I mean, literally throwing things around the room. This was the anger. Do you know what I mean? But it all stems back to her dad not wanting her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, so I knew how important it was for, my nephew to have, some kind of ties with his biological father's family. And, for my sister to be able to grieve and to move forward, that, do you know what I mean? That this wasn't her fault. And like I said, you've got to think, I'm thinking of our 15-year-old would think.
It's funny you actually say that, because my father, I actually think, didn't want me. I was the youngest, and I kind of like must have been, if I said runt of the litter. Does that make sense? Yeah, right. So I was the youngest of the children. He was, I don't know, 67, I think, when he helped produce me. And so I don't know what kind of life, but he was a drunk alcoholic. We used to have a kitchen table where we used to sit at this kitchen table, and it was only a small flat that we had, and it was a cardboard box on this table. I used to hide in there. I was frightened of my dad because I knew what he'd do. I knew he'd beat me with a leather belt. So when you talk about, I can get what you understand. I totally understand when you're saying, I went through the council estate we lived on in them days in Fulham. If you got into an argument, you could get chucked off the balcony. As daft as that might seem. And children, if you misbehaved, the wheelie bins were that big. They used to be the size of this conservatory, the wheelie bins, and they used to be on these big chutes, and you could fit a child down a chute easily.
Oh my God.
So I can totally get where you're coming from on that side of it, because I think I wasn't wanted by my own father.
Yeah, and it used to make me feel sad for her because she just desperately wanted that, love from him. And there was me in a way, my dad completely adored me. He'd give me whatever I wanted. I only had to ring him, and and he used to wind me up and call me his little tomboy, and things like that. But they didn't have that. But the one thing, I'll always say about my dad and my nan's side of the family as well, they always, whenever it was Christmas and stuff, I mean, fair enough, they used to bring me about 3 bin bags full, but they'd always bring a bin bag full for my sisters each, one each for them. So they weren't like left out or anything like that, which, was important to me as well, because I think they used to get a bit jealous, which I'm not surprised, because, because my dad wanted me, and I know that sounds horrible as well. Do you know what I mean?
So you was living with this guy?
So I was in his mum and dad's house. So his mum
Yeah.
and dad downstairs. I was upstairs in his bedroom. So really, the control what he's had on me, he's got from January to February, and basically then in his, do you know what I mean? In his bedroom. I should have been doing some of my exams, but I didn't do them because I was with him all the time, and he was just constantly around me. And then I found out I was pregnant in the May, but it would have been in the April when I would have been pregnant, but I wouldn't have known. And then in the July time, like I said, I was just about to say, yeah, I felt unwell, and he ended up just dropping me off at the hospital, which is, well, it's only up the road. Dropped me off at the hospital, but obviously he didn't come in, and then that's when I had a miscarriage. Yeah, so which was awful because I didn't understand what was going on, and I've got all these doctors and nurses now. But thankfully, someone had the nous to ring me mum. Do you know what I mean? And my mum came to the hospital, so she was there. But you know, my mum said, even my mum to this day, she'll say she's never seen anything like it in my life. I think I was trying to punch them all, kick them all, because I didn't know what was going on. Do you know what I mean? And then you get in pains like you're in full blown labour. And obviously, I've gone on to have 4 kids, and you know, it's pretty heavy. And when you're 15, you don't know what's going on. So, you know, but just going back to young children being abused, you know, can you imagine if they're getting caught pregnant under a certain age, and then what these, if they have a miscarriage or so, you know, or in the fallopian tubes and things like that, then what them poor children are going to have to go through. Do you know what I mean? It's horrendous.
Yeah.
And it's something that'll still haunt me to this day. You know, and then my dad died as well. My dad had been diagnosed with cancer a few months prior to this. So when the day I'd lost my baby was my dad's funeral, that the next day, if you like. So they had to release me from hospital to go to his funeral, and then obviously go back into hospital, and then I was released like I think a day or so later. But you know, and that's another big thing, that because I feel that my dad had died at that point, you know, I know for a fact that my dad would have gone out of his way to find out where, you know, if he hadn't have been got cancer and stuff, he'd have gone out of his way to find out what was going on. And believe you me, this relationship or whatever, you know, would have ended whether I'd have liked it or not liked it, or whatever the situation would have been. He'd have made sure that that would have, you know, stopped at that point. Now, when, you know, and I was just explaining before that, you know, the children's dad was saying that the baby wasn't his and stuff. So you can imagine the trauma of that as a young child. Do you know what I mean? And after I'd lost the baby, he was saying like, well, what you're upset for and what you're worried, why are you crying about your dad for? You know, you didn't love him. And I mean, when I look back and I think about it, it's like a cruelty. It's like this mental torture, someone jipping at you all the time. It's because they want to control you. And you know,
so he was totally controlling you.
Yeah, and through these mums up as well, he told me, you know, not to tell me mum and stuff like that, and you know, just kept coming up with different stories to say different things. And you know, when my mum had asked me after I'd lost the baby what who it was and that, and I wouldn't tell her, you know, I suppose maybe she might kick herself back at that point, that maybe she should have done a bit more. But you know, I suppose a lot of things are in hindsight. She was looking after my sister's child as well at that point. You know, my sister was going, you know, and then she's got this happen with me. I suppose maybe she didn't know if she was coming or going, I don't know. And maybe she thought that he was about my age and just thought, well, is that what kids do? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I can't speak, you know, obviously I can't speak for her, can I? But I do know my mum is a really, really good mum, and you know, maybe and this is the thing, you don't see the signs, do you? Do you know what I mean? Because you think that sometimes the abuse as well is just when you know, small as, do you know what I mean? And you know, all this grooming that's going on at the minute, you know, it's quite high levels of teenagers, isn't it, that it's happening to? So there's obviously issues going on somewhere, because if it's happened to me in the 90s, it's happening in the 2000s. It's been going on in the clearly from me mum, 80s, 70s, 60s, and back and back and back. Do you know what I mean? So, and then, you know, when it did go through, sorry, I don't know where it was, but when I went through the miscarriage, you know, I just felt so empty and lost, and I didn't know what had gone on with myself. And I'm quite a spiritual person, and I just feel that if that child had lived, and now I've always felt this, that if that child had lived, this situation wouldn't have continued. Well, it wouldn't have continued, would it? Because it'd have had a live child there that would have been complete evidence to show what had actually just gone on. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that would have been prevented. And then
Didn't the people that was in or his parents, right?
yeah,
Didn't they say anything?
yeah, no, this is the thing. She used to make me tea and everything, but he just used to bring it upstairs.
So it was worse than being in a prison cell in some respects, because all you were was confined to his bedroom.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
Oh,
So,
did
did,
take me to Blackpool in the it would have been the April time of 1994. Got photos of it as well, you see. So he took me to Blackpool with his mates and another girl. Now these are all traceable, you know, people still today, and all the people that were at the babysitter brought back are all traceable today as well. You know,
crumbs.
all the, you know, the same age men. Do you know what I mean? All his mates around the same age. You know,
Yeah.
they're all this. And
It's a
one of them,
difficult question. I'm going to ask you a difficult question now. So, with you being confined to this room, now, when you wanted to go to the loo, or if you wanted to have a wash or a bath or something like that, or a shower, right? Could you use facilities like that? Of course, you know, or did they just put a bucket in the room?
it mainly locked me in when he went out. So, like, say if he was in the room, the door, you know, it wasn't constantly locked when he was in the room, but the door would be shut, and I could just like maybe nip the loo or whatever. And then obviously he'd just like arrange whenever. I'd be like, well, I need to get a shower or something, you know. And he'd just like, oh, well, I'll just go and like tell me mum and dad that you're going to get a shower, so no one would just come upstairs. Do you know what I mean?
So there was no way you could escape if you tried to.
No, no, unless I wanted to jump from his bedroom window.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. So it was like he had me like in a bit of a cocoon. Do you know what I mean? With him,
Yeah.
like he just used to play like Donkey Kong. You know, Donkey Kong on the
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
you know,
Oh
and it's
God.
you know, it's and
That's,
then
that's quite a horrendous thing to go through in itself, because, like, that's psychological warfare on your own mind. You know, I mean, how you cope with that situation. And when we talk about what we went through as children and in childcare, and like when we were younger, we did not have a say. End of. We didn't say
yeah,
anything. We couldn't say anything. If we said anything or did anything, we were punished even more. And this is the fundamental thing that worries me, is that you don't get an opportunity to defend yourself or to speak for yourself, because they don't allow it. There's
yeah.
nothing in any of the records to say them children will fall.
Oh, we lost Al. Oh, Alan just might need to refresh, guys. Are we there, Jace?
No, he's gone as well.
Has
It's
he
just
gone?
that.
I was just.
Gone.
Oh, yeah. So, Sue, do you want to say a little bit about, because obviously you were an older teenager as well, weren't you? When
Yeah, I mean, like my abuse didn't start till I was 14.
I need your consent on a few items to continue.
Stupid woman.
yeah, so I was 15.
You know, I mean, I was luckier than most children, because before I went into care, I had a loving family, a mum
Yeah.
and dad, you know, and I had grandparents on both sides, loads of aunts and uncles. But you could never tell anyone.
Yeah,
You couldn't tell them what was going on, you know. It just wasn't done in them days. And what puzzles me to this day is that when I got put away, nobody questioned it.
that's
No,
it.
none of my family questioned it, you know. And then once, I think I nicked my files from the office in the hospital, and I read it. And when I took them back, there was a nurse there, was a child nurse. He was lovely, Arthur Catlin. And he said, "Did you have a good read?" I said, "Yeah." And we was talking, and he said to me, "Do you know you could have been taken out of here any time? There's no court order on you or nothing."
Wow.
But nobody wanted me because I was in there. you know, so it was horrible, you know, because they all thought that I was a nutcase, and they used to treat me like one and talk to me like one and
Yeah.
things, you know. I mean, I was allowed to go home at weekends, but when I went home to one place, I was getting abused there.
Yeah.
So what I'd already reported abuse. What's the point of me trying to report it again when that, you know, I got put away for what I did,
Shocking.
you know. And then when I left there, they said I was going to my nan's, but then when I got there, she didn't want me. So I had nowhere to go, and I stayed at a friend's, and I ended up at cousin whose husband was abusing me. And it just I later found out in life that it was a few years ago that my family only had us home for weekends because they got paid for it.
Wow.
So it wasn't done because they loved me.
Yeah.
And you know, they all sat going on about my mum was this, my mum was that, she was lovely, you know, and everything. And they treated her children like they did, you know, because me and all three of my brothers ended up on the streets.
Wow.
You know, so it is hard sometimes, but you know, I haven't told my full story, and I will one day. But you know, there was abuse in the hospital as well, and there's actually I've seen there looking at that as well.
Yeah. It's horrendous when, you know, just from listening to you, you've obviously, you know, at certain points, you know, you got to 14, and then at these points, these people who are meant to have been, you know, looking out for you and caring for you, and that's like even worse.
Yeah, I mean, the first two houses that I was in Beechholme, the
Sorry,
first
Jake,
house.
you have to let Alan back in because he got lost, he got stuck. Are you there, Jace?
Oh, they're both gone. They've deserted us.
I thought Jason popped back in for a minute on
Yeah,
there.
he's up here twice.
Yeah, I thought so. I just don't know if Alan needs someone to let him in.
Hi mate, yeah, I popped back in to turn off the waiting room so Alan can get back in. So he can get in as soon as he's ready.
All right, is he trying to get in, Jace, or he froze?
If he tries, he'll get straight in. So
all right, oh, I see, all right.
I've turned off that waiting room thing.
Yeah. No, you know, the first two houses I was in, there was no abuse. You know, it wasn't in every house in Beechholme.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't, there was quite a few that it was in, but not the two of them that I was in.
Yeah.
You know,
and that is good to know though as well, that, you know, that thankfully there is a ray of good out there, and it is a majority of, you know, bad people, uneducated, etc., you know, indoctrinated people that are doing this stuff to people.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I suppose I was one of the lucky ones because I had my dad and I had my brothers, and if you look through the Beechholme lot, a lot of the families have nothing to do with each other. They're all split up. My family are still together. You know, I'm very close to my brothers.
Yeah.
And my eldest brother would do anything for me. But, you know, it's just so sad when you see, you know, mine's not the worst story. There's a lot worse off than me. And you just, I think with me, whatever's happened to me through life since all this, I've accepted it.
Yeah.
That's how my life's supposed to go, you know, being put down all the time. And it still happened when I was married to my first husband and that. And since then, I'm not my second husband, he never put me down, but you just accept it. That's your life. That's who you are. You know.
I think another big point to make, you know, when you are being mentally abused or abused, you know, it's surprising how long you can endure
Yeah. I mean, once I had my daughter, I mean, I was living on the streets when I was pregnant, and I was living by the side of Wormwood Scrubs prison because nobody could see me in the shadows,
Wow.
you know.
That must have been awful.
Yeah, once I had her, my motherly instincts took over. But then you had social services who would do anything to take your child away,
Wow.
and I got a flat in the end. And
It shows how long they've been taking kids, or that, I mean, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's full.
yeah, and when they wrote up a report, it was always putting me down.
Yeah.
And I was
Really?
doing, what I could. In them days, I mean, when I first got my first council flat, I got £18 a week for me and my daughter. There was no child benefit for the first one,
Yeah.
and £9 something of that was my rent,
Wow.
and the rest was food. But I had no furniture. They gave me £36 to furnish my house.
Wow.
Um,
Like,
and they was
what?
always on my case,
Yeah.
always on my case. And I had my second daughter, and I was sent her to school. She never used to talk to many people.
Yeah.
And one day I've gone to pick her up, and they said to me, somebody's been putting cigarettes out on her tongue. I said, what? And she's got a rash on her bottom. And I said, well, I can't see, nobody's stuck any cigarettes. Anyway, the
Yeah.
doctor come round the next day, got hold of Emma, looked at her, and then he went. Well, when I went to the school, they said, oh, didn't you know the case against you's been closed? She's got tongue fungus. And he said she's allergic to nylon. And my Emma used to strip off when she'd come in, and she was allergic to the carpet,
Wow.
And I was petrified.
I can imagine.
I was married then to my first husband, and then all of a sudden they left me alone.
And not just that, don't forget you've had them lock you up, you away. So you know
Yeah.
what you're capable of.
Yeah, exactly. And when I went for custody of I got my granddaughter first. She's 26 now. When she was a baby, and then I got the boys. I fought in court for them, but I was petrified of social services, and you had to have them involved because they were my grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I was just, every time they'd come down, I was a bag of nerves.
Yeah.
And he said like one day he said, I want to talk to the boys. So I said, we'll go and sit in the bedroom and talk to them. And he said, why are you insisting on that? I said, so you can't say that I'm influencing anything they've got to say to you. I mean, they were 4 and 6 years old, but he spoke to them. And then everything was going fine in my favour. My eldest grandson, Jack, it is funny now, but it wasn't at the time. I'd done all the ironing, and we lived in the top floor flat, and he threw it all out the window. So I just said to him, why'd you do that? Oh, he went berserk. He was calling me a whore, everything, kicking me in the stomach. And all I did was smacked his leg once. That's all I did, and he stopped. And he was breaking his heart, saying, I should be dead. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be alive. I should be dead. And that was breaking my heart, and I was cuddling him. Well, when the social worker came, he told the social worker I hit him 36 times.
Oh my God, aren't they little buggers?
So the social worker stopped the custody going through.
Back.
All right, you want to finish your story? You finish you off.
Oh.
No, you finish yours. Hello, Alan.
Oh, sorry about that. I've had 3 power cuts today, and just in the middle of you, Tink, I've got another power cut, and I'm so sorry about that. I do apologise.
Oh,
it's all for going wrong, because when I had to get up, my toilet was running and the water was just continually flowing, and I had to go up and try and get it sorted.
So I do apologise about that, Tinky. If
okay, me and Sue were just talking about, because obviously Sue was like 14, you know, when her review started. So we were just having a bit of a discussion, you know,
Yeah.
about the age, you know, and what had been going on for Sue around that time.
Yeah. So now you carry on with Tinky.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tink, do you want to carry on with a little bit more? I mean, I remember you was talking. Oh, I don't know, what was we? 1990.
We were still in 94, weren't we?
94. We were in 94, and this guy was 25 years, 10 years your elder, and he was
Yeah.
basically a prisoner within his bedroom.
Yeah.
And it was lucky you had to ask permission just to go to the loo and to have a wash and a shower.
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't let his mum and dad see me, you see, because then he knew that people would start asking questions. So obviously he knew what he was doing was wrong. Otherwise, you'd have been open about it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't have hid somebody away, you know, up there. So yeah, so when I lost the baby, you know, obviously I was upset about that. He was saying, you know, that the baby wasn't his, and obviously the baby was his. And then during that August, I ended up enrolling myself doing a childcare course. So it was 2 years childcare, you know. So I did that, and then I just went back and forth, you know, to his mum's address really. And then yeah, so then I turned 16 in the August. 5 days before I turned 16, he took me to a wedding of his friends. So I have got, you know, other visual evidence to prove that, you know, we were together at these points. When I go into when I've reported it to the police, you know, the police have never gone out to interview my parents. Sadly, one of his parents has died this year, but one of them is still alive. And there's other people about that they could interview, but they still haven't gone to any of them yet, or even looked at the photographic evidence that I've got. So, you know, it's a little
This
bit.
comes back time and time again. There is enough evidence out there for police forces and the authorities to deal with this, to understand it.
Yeah.
Now, I can understand where you're coming. This is the same with Sue. She was put in a mental institution at 14 years of age while
That's
still in childcare.
Absolutely awful. And then, sorry, Al, while I was doing my childcare course, I got pregnant again. So I was pregnant at 16, and then I had my son at 17. And then I went through the same abuse of him again, saying that it wasn't his. So I ended up having DNA with him. I said, well, it is your kid, you know what I mean? I don't go anywhere. You've got me tracked to you. Because obviously, you know, at those points, I did kind of think that, you know, his behaviour was a bit abnormal. And, you know, it come back that my son was his son. But when I had my son, I went back home to my mum. So I had a bit of freedom again. Do you know, not freedom as in, but, you know, I was more relaxed. I was in my home environment. I was around my family. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I was back at home with my mum. When my son was 6 weeks old, he ended up getting like gastroenteritis, and he was being sick. Now, my ex-partner thought it'd be better to go to Blackpool than, you know, come to the hospital and sort his son out. You know, so when I was in hospital with him, you know, for a few days, you know, bearing in mind, I'm only a young kid myself, having a kid. But, you know, the minute I had my son, you know, it's just, motherhood to me was just like second nature. Does that make sense?
No,
not
at all.
The minute I had him, you know, as much as I found it overwhelming, you know, I realised that anything that he ate or anything absorbed mentally, you know, it was down to me to make sure that everything was good and right, and that, you know, any information that he was getting, you know, was how we should be living, the Christian values, you know, you treat other people nice, etc. I mean, obviously not as a baby, you're going to teach them all those little things, but you get where I'm coming from, don't you? And I wanted him to have the best of, you know, whatever it was that I could give him. I'm not talking, you know, thousands of pounds worth of clothes and money. I'm talking about love and attention and, you know, the right food in his body, and, you know, making sure that, you know, bad things aren't on around him on the telly or whatever it is, to keep him in that nice little world that children should be in. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, I suppose I did, but behind that, I was being mentally abused. Does that make sense? By father, because you know, when someone accuses the child of not being yours, well, you know, it's not a little thing. That's mind games. That, you know, and then obviously when he found out, well, it was his child. Well, you know, he couldn't keep using that at me. But then he got me pregnant again. And I know you might think, well, it's your fault. You should have done something. But I didn't understand all about the contraceptions at that point. And, you know, things were happening that quick that no time to got come up for air from one thing. Something else was happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then in '96, my mum got married. So my mum basically left me at home. So she left me. She went and moved in with her husband now, who she'd been with since I was 11. And then, you know, unbeknown really to my mum, that maybe that was the worst thing she could have done, because then that gave him green light to move in and be around me 24/7 in a house.
Oh my God.
So yeah.
So you had the entrapment in one house,
No,
and then it's moved with you to your mother's house. Oh my God.
Yeah, so because I took over the tenancy.
Did you fear him?
Yeah, because he could be, you know, he was aggressive as well. You know, would be in your face. It's quite, how can I put it?
It was controlling. Very
Yeah,
controlling.
I only have to look at you and you'd know. Do you get me?
Yeah.
Just know that something's not right, and the atmosphere, you could feel it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when he got me pregnant, then I got pregnant when I was 18. So I just had my other one pregnant again. It started again. Oh, don't forget one's mine. Do you know what I mean? Well, I was at a point where I said, you can basically fuck off. You're having no DNA. It is your kid. Stop playing it. You know what I mean? Stop playing mind games. You know, I won't be doing it. If you want one, we'll go and ask, you know, well, if he came today, we'll go and do it yourself and find out. Do you get me? I mean, it's 20 odd years later now, but you know, and that was dead upsetting for me. It was a total mind game thing. And then he used to have this stereo as well, and he used to, you know, say, oh, I'm leaving you. And, you know, but this was like his big thing, that if the stereo was going, I was meant to be up in arms. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, he'd use things like that, and it'd just be constantly, you know, if your mates rang you or something, not that I had like loads of mates, but just your mates from school that you'd still kind of stayed in touch with, and just say they were telling you about their life. Well, you know, they were only young kids themselves. So, you know, some of them were going out, some had just got new boyfriends or whatever it was. Well, straight away, they're all slags, they're all this, they're all that. Anyone I spoke to, anyone I knew, oh, you know, there'd be something, do you know what I mean? So
your education must have suffered from this as well, Tinky.
Well, no, I finished my childcare course. I passed all that. Then I went to work nights, and I did my MVQs in health and social care. So I went and got a job when I had my first son. I went and worked nights, because I think some of that was down to his the mental side of the, you know, I needed to get out. So I did 2 nights a week, which was good, because then it, you know, it brought in obviously money for the family and stuff. My family supported him while he did, so he could become a driving instructor, you know, paid for him and that. And my mum gave him a car as well, you know, so he could take me and the kids out. But, you know, it didn't really work out that way. He'd just run off to his mum and dad's every day, you know. And even when he was at mine, that'd be the control. He'd just leave her at home with the kids and he'd just go off. Do you know what I mean? So I think after I'd had my daughter, I kind of just put my head down and focused on the kids and just, you know, on my house.
Did you have your daughter at 18?
Yeah.
18.
Yeah. And then I just kind of stayed focused, you know, just doing that and trying to save for holidays, and I got a mortgage and things like that. And I suppose before I knew it, I was in something that I just couldn't get out of. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And all the time I'd be feeling like dead miserable, not at my kids, because my kids, I adored my kids. And I'm not saying every day that it was miserable in the house. It wasn't, because, you know, I'll give him his, you know, where credit's due, where credit's due. He is, you know, he can work hard and that to a point. And I will say he does adore his kids, but he's a mental abuser and a controller. So, you know, it's a difficult one, you
It
know.
is a difficult one to suffer, because what people don't quite understand is that there are so many different aspects to abuse.
Yeah,
And what you suffered for. A lot of the stuff you've said today resonates with me, in the fact that I can understand some of what you were saying with living on rough council estates, having you were lucky in some sense where you had a loving relationship, whereas we didn't have a loving relationship. We didn't have any love and affection, so it
yeah.
could turn you the other way.
So,
As
do you know what, Alan, that is a massive point, that, because when you're being abused and somebody that you're meant to trust and think that's there for you, and you know, you find a lot, you know, where cases where they've been kidnapped
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
victim will find it difficult to speak up about the abuser, because they've manipulated them so much that when they're being so bad to them mentally or even physically, they'll then swap it round to make you think that they're this amazing person, and you know that, you know, this, do you know what I mean? They twist it so you never quite know where you are with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you feel the courage to think, right, I've had enough now and I'm leaving and that's it, they'll behave for months like this amazing person. Do you know what I mean? But they're not this amazing, but then that behaviour pops back out again. Do you know what I mean? But I find as well that these controllers as well, since I've been doing my research, will get people pregnant young so they know where they are at all times. Because if you're a mother, where you're going to be? You're going to be with your kids, aren't you? You're not going to be going out. You're not going to be going seeing your mates. You know.
And that must be strange for you as well, being such a young woman when it started, and the controlling and so forth, and ruining or controlling your life. And that must have been so difficult to comprehend. And yeah, I feel bad, you know, that we still have this type of thing happening in this world today, where, you know, this control thing.
Yeah, well, it's still now, Alan. 26 years later, he's still controlling my life, even though I left him. You know, so when you think about it, my abuse, my mental side of the abuse started at 15, and it's never stopped, and I'm now 41. And because I'm still going through the system with him about my children, you know, it's never stopped. So if we just go back to then when I had my daughter, so I was working nights then, and I just basically put my head down, focused on, you know, trying to make this like as if it was this, you know, lovely, perfect thing, which it really wasn't to a point. You know, because he was constantly then accusing me, saying that my daughter wasn't his. But that went on for years. It didn't just stop at that, you know, first beginning bit. That went on and on and on and on and on. And then
So right, Jekyll and Hyde, wasn't he?
yeah, and through the years, obviously, I'd go to leave him, or you know, or because that was it, because I couldn't get him out of the house. You see, he'd threatened to leave me, which was good, but then he'd never actually go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then because I wanted to get him out of the house, and because we weren't married, that was another hard thing to try to do. Does that make sense as well at the time? So, in 2004, so there was plenty of time. So we had a few holidays with the kids and stuff, which he just showed his true colours on. He just, do you know what I mean? It was just awful, really. It was, how can I describe him?
All controlling, overpowering.
Yeah, I mean, after I had my son Jack, in 2005, we went on a holiday and he completely ignored his own child the whole holiday. I mean, this behaviour is abnormal. Do you know what I mean? So there was like arguments, and you know, it'd be in me face and shove me and, you know, pull me. Is it, you know, I think there was once or twice where he threw his plate across the room and stuff like that. But sprayed de-icer in my eyes, weird stuff. Do you know what I mean? But that wasn't like every day or anything like that. Or do you know what I mean? This would just pout up every now and again. So just as maybe you got over something would erupt, and then, you know, something would settle down and then it'd erupt again. Do you know what I mean?
You was kind of like, and this sounds horrible thing to say, and maybe I'm wrong, and correct me if I'm saying it in the wrong manner, but you was almost like his sex toy.
Yeah, I used to have to ring my mum, and my mum used to say, counting down, 1, you this, 2, you that, 3, you this, 4, you that, 5, you this.
Yeah.
So every time I started, I'd just ring my mum up and say I was starting again, and he followed me room to room to room to room.
Oh
The
my
kids,
God.
this isn't, you know what I mean? But because he knew obviously that the older one was, you know.
Do you think that made you kind of like, you're such a young adult, or you're such a young lady, that you kind of had to grow up very, very quickly? Does that make sense?
Yeah, very quick, you know, because he wouldn't let me go out or see my friends. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And he'd have to control. I think that's why he kept quite a bit of a good relationship with my mum at points, you know, to keep her under his little poo, if you like.
Keep her sweet.
Yeah, and so I wouldn't talk too much. Like I might say certain things, but not too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's he not only was playing mind games with you, he was doing it to your folks as well.
Yeah.
Oh
Play
my God.
all the time with it, you know.
It's
And
surprising you managed to actually live a sane life, because
well,
when I see you, when I talk to you, when I see you campaigning, you speak so well, you sound so good. The things that you do, what I've seen when you're doing it outside, and you're such a great campaigner, and you're so passionate, and it's like you're kind of like a very mature person.
yeah. Yeah, I suppose, like you say, I've had to be really from a young age, and I was in the swing of having, you know, cooking meals from a young age, and you know, going to work, going to college, and you know, I suppose I am one of them people. If I put my mind to something, I do, you know, put my heart and soul into it. So, you know, my children were my heart and soul. So I suppose that's what took my mind off, you know, what was going on with him at times. You know what I mean? I mean, don't get me wrong, he loves his kids. I'm not going to say that he doesn't love his kids, because he does. It's about me, this is about controlling me. Do you know what I mean? And then when I had my son in 2000, got pregnant in 2004, 2005, I was going to leave him. So there's been points throughout where I've always gone to leave him, but then he's wormed his way and promised he'd change, and you know, it wouldn't be like that. Do you know what I mean? And then it started again. Oh, I don't think, you know, this child's is, and everything, and which was just heartbreaking. And then when I had my son, I just decided to myself that well, not that I wouldn't let him have much input. How can I put it? I just didn't need him. Does that make sense? Because whereas I think beforehand, he tried to use that, you know, because when you have kids and that, because I didn't live with my dad, I think that's why I stayed with him for so long. I wanted my kids to have a dad, and I wanted them to have that nice little family life. And do you know what I mean? And you know, the older two did have a lot of that niceness with, or they didn't see behind the scenes. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So they didn't see a lot, but they did see some things, but not a lot, because it was kind of kept away. But whereas I'd say the younger two have been dragged through so much as well, emotional abuse for, you know, and that's not just through my ex-partner. This is then going into the services that are around there that are meant to help us.
How old was you when you had Jack?
25.
25. Yeah, I was thinking around about that, because I was trying to work it out about the 10-year difference between you and him anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, in between that time, I mean, I just stayed in my job for like about 10 years, and I did my nursery nursing, not my nursery nursing, my health and social care level 2 and 3, and I'd do courses at the kids' school, because they used to do all sorts of, like computer courses and all sorts of stuff. So
Yeah.
I suppose I just kept myself busy, doing things like that, and
Yeah, they used to do further education, so on and so forth.
I didn't know how to leave him as well. I just didn't know how to. I know that sounds silly, but I didn't know how to, and because the mortgage was all tied in his name and all, and it just seemed like I didn't know where to start. And then in 2005, he started again accusing me. But
So now he would be in his 30s or around
Oh.
about 30.
sorry, no, this is still so he's accusing me of this child,
Yeah.
not being, didn't pay him any attention when he was younger, really, hardly ever. It might be on show for when people were about, but that was about it. Do you know what I mean? He slept in my other son's room for 10 months when I had my other son, which, the emotional trauma of that, it was a clear as if I didn't want this child, do you know what I mean? To me, wasn't interested in bathing him. He was a lot more hands-on with the other two. So even though he was saying that they weren't his, he was completely saying that this one wasn't his, but having nothing really as such. Oh, and then he started to say that he was my golden child, and there was all this weird abuse going on, and then I try and leave him again, and of course then he wormed his way back in. Then when I was 30, so in
How did you cope with all
2009,
this? Because it's really, really hard for people to try and understand that like as a young woman, this guy's kept you as like a prisoner, and like forced himself on you at time after time, and it's just hard to. Oh my God! Just to imagine somebody having to go through that type of thing. It doesn't. It just sounds so cruel.
the times where I wasn't sort of pregnant, I was using contraception, because obviously, and that's another thing. I had come to a point where I was saying to him, well, why don't you do something? I said, I did say to him, I said, at 15, you shouldn't have even been doing what you were doing if you knew that would get me pregnant. And there's a risk that someone could have a miscarriage. Why would you want to put someone through that at 15? I said, you're a grown man. I'm a kid. How could you do that?
Did that affect you, Tinky? That miscarriage?
Sorry.
Did the miscarriage, your first child, your first miscarriage, did that affect you?
Oh yeah, really bad. Yeah, and I think that's why maybe I went on to why my son appeared, sort of thing, and it was just awful. Like it was like as if I don't know, like Emily Rose exorcism. That's only how I can describe it. You're on like this bed, and
Yeah.
you've got your pants off, and you don't want people by you anyway, because you know what I mean. Showing, we, like I said, we didn't have real sex education, and it's not just something you do, is it? Go around showing your bits,
No.
And you just feel violated.
Yeah.
No explaining anything what they were doing or what was going on, which is even worse. Do you know what I mean? So you've got all people coming at you. You don't even know what's happening to you.
And you had no control over the situation either.
No, and no one even questioned it, like how she got pregnant. Blah blah blah, etc. etc. Nothing.
And then when you see nobody question it, when you see nothing happening, you think, is this the way it's supposed to be?
Well, yeah.
I know it sounds crazy thing to say.
Well, yeah, and even when you go back to the doctor in the May time, I would have gone to the doctors in. Why wasn't they raising concerns? When I went for a scan, why didn't they raise concerns? And then it was around that week later when I had this miscarriage. But I always remember when I went for a scan, I remember him whispering and saying something. And when you just know that something, but I didn't know what. But they didn't say, you see. And again, they weren't communicating.
My God.
I mean, I don't know if there was, but when I had a sense that I just, I looked at them and I seen them talk, but I didn't know what they were saying.
So when was your first dealings then with social
services? Not until I left my ex-partner in 2013.
Well, that's a long, long time, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've raised children, Alan, since I was 15, 16. And then, so in 2012, after I'd had my daughter in 2009, the abuse just kept coming. Do you know what I mean? This child wasn't his, and it was just constant mind games all the time. He was constantly accusing me of stuff. I
Well, he
started
did that with all the kids, didn't he? Really, he tried to deny it all.
I started writing out diaries, and then I finally got the courage to go to a solicitor's, and this is how I got onto how bad the solicitors are. So I went to the solicitors, explained that although he was on the mortgage, I paid the mortgage the whole entire time we were together. And I've still got all the bank statements to prove this because I'm still with the same bank. You know, to try and get him out. But she was trying to say, like, because he was on it, that he couldn't get out of it. And because we weren't married, you know, but you see, I know that now I know about common law, you know, if I'd have known then what I knew now, I could have maybe gone a different route about it. Do you know what I mean? So she was like trying to say as if, you know, there's not a lot we can do about this and etc. etc. And then around that time he started working me head again, saying, oh, I'll change, blah blah blah. And so I ended up giving him another chance. And then in 2012, I think it was, yeah, in the August time, it started playing all these mind games and this, that, and the other, and it was just constant. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know, something just snapped in me. Oh, that was it. My house was getting sold. I finally put my house up for sale, and it was going to get sold. And then he was still playing all these games, and then he wanted me to get a bigger mortgage because I just got a job at the hospital on the spinal unit. You know, for me to pay this bigger mortgage, blah, 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 etc., etc. And it'd have meant me working more hours. So then it'd have been time that I wouldn't have been seeing the kids, which, you know, obviously I want to work, but I want to see my kids. You know, I want the kids to have, you know, at least a decent start of things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously, what was he contributing? Nothing, you know, which that had been for the last however many years to a point. So something just come over me. Oh, that was it. There'd been a party on my dad's side of the family now, because when my dad died when I was 15, he wouldn't, you know, speak to any of my dad's side of the family or anything. Are you still there, Al?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, go on.
Oh,
You're doing so well, and it's so good to hear you talking, because, you know, like, you're almost doing the interviewing rather than being the interviewer. So, do you get what I mean?
Oh,
It's nice
sorry.
to hear you talking. It's lovely.
So I'd gone to a family party, and I'd said, like, you know, you're going to change, you're going to have to come to these sort of things. Anyway, he'd come, but he managed to stay for 20 minutes. Left me kids with money. So my younger kids were at my mum's because they were too young to attend the party, but the older kids had come because obviously they were old enough to come, because they were like 14, 15 at the time. And it was my cousin's 40th birthday party. So he managed to stay there 20 minutes, saying that I hadn't introduced him properly, or this, how, I don't know what the shenanigans was, do you know what I mean? And then he left his son with a tenner. And I was just like, right, okay. And then I just said to my older son, so what do you want to do, love? I said, do you want to stay or do you want to go? I said, because I think I'm going to be here for a little bit, to be honest. You know, I just thought I'm staying like till it finishes, basically. I'm not going home in an hour like he wants me to do, or what, you know. So so my son had said that he wanted to go home. So I said, well, you use this money to get a taxi back. I said, and by the time you get home, your dad will be there. Do you know what I mean? So that's what he did. He said his goodbyes to everyone, because he'd be quite happy playing his game, if you like. Do you know what I mean? And so my daughter stayed with me, and then we ended up going back to my cousin's house, and we were all talking about my dad and telling stories, and it was lovely. But granted, we didn't get home till about 2 o'clock in the morning. And once we got in, and then in the morning and that, I got up and stuff, and then her dad's like, as if, you know, what were you doing last night? Who were you sleeping with? And it just all started again. So I said, do you want to come upstairs and ask your daughter? So I went upstairs to my daughter, and this was the tipping on the iceberg. That I had to say to my daughter, you know, like, do you know what I mean? And something just snapped in me, and then we come downstairs, and I just looked at him, and I just said, that's the last fucking time, because I knew my house was getting sold, and just I just walked out, went and got my younger kids from my mum's. I went to my mum's and I said, "Mum, can I move in?" Like, and she's like, "What?" I said, "I'm leaving him." I said, "My house is getting sold." I said,
Just imagine you. It's weird feeling that. Like, can just imagine you a kind of scenario of walking down the streets with your bags in one hand and your kids in the other, kind of thing. Do you know? Does that make kind of sense?
yeah. But I always knew it would be difficult to leave him because he would still want to control everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't. What time are we on, Al?
We're nearly at the end now, so we might have a couple of minutes. I'm sorry about the glitch that we had.
The next little section we could catch up when you're next free on just then I can talk about the solicitors, the social services, and how all the policing.
Yeah, I was going to try and get that in, but we're not going to have time to do that. But I mean, you're very, very brave to go through this because it's like living another nightmare when you talk about it. I mean, I know you've done well and you've got great grandkids now, haven't you? I mean, it's fantastic what you've achieved now because you absolutely worship your grandkids, don't you?
Oh, I adore them all, and this is the sad thing that my grandchildren don't even know that I'm my youngest child's mum. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
When I go a little bit when you're next free, I don't mean next week, but whenever.
We'll sort it out. We'll sort it out and let you do a bit more, and we're trying to. I'll keep some notes of what I've made tonight, and then we can come back into this quite easily.
If it's in a few weeks, if it's in a month, if it's
we'll sort something out, Tinky. Don't worry. I've got to thank everybody for coming on. Sue, I'm sorry you didn't get much chance to say anything, but I really, really wanted to get Tinky to tell her story. And it's just a couple of words or so. I know it sounds a horrible thing to say. What do you think of what you've heard tonight?
Well, I mean, I can relate to some of what she said because I've been through it myself, with one of my husbands and the controlling and everything, and the leaving. It's just heartbreaking that, and I'm surprised you're still sane.
Yeah.
I really am surprised, to have gone through that long suffering. It's so wrong.
I know.
Thank you for that, Sue. I've got to say, look, it's now 18 minutes past, so we've got to turn around and say thank you very much to you, Tinky, for coming on tonight. And I'm sorry we had a little bit of a technical mistake, little technical error. And Sue, thank you for the backup there, and thank you for.
It's all right. No.
There. And so we'll come back again and have you on again, Tinky. And thank you again for coming on and telling your story.
Oh, no.
I'm just amazed by how you've gone on in life and what a person you've become.
Yeah.
So thank you, guys, for giving me the opportunity, because the mental side of things, is and just to say thanks to you two for sharing your testimonies, because that affects me in my heart what everybody's gone and going through, and mine's not as bad as mine's nothing. Mine's a drop in the ocean to what children have gone through and stuff like that. But we all just need to come together because it's that we've got to say, isn't it?
Well said, Tinky. On that note, what you said, Tinky, that summons the show up very, very well. Again, thank you everybody for tonight, and we've got to leave it there. So thank you once again.
All right, speak to you later.
And I'll speak to you later. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye.
Bye.
Phone me.